One thing we know about every single season of fantasy football is you think the previous week was the craziest week you'll see. The next week comes in and it's just as crazy, if not even crazier. So I do it every single week. We're going through the top 12 defense rankings for week 9 fantasy football. And it was requested that I do these videos before waivers process on Wednesday morning. And I'm a man of the people, so we're doing it on Tuesday before waivers process on Wednesday. And not only am I one of the only fantasy football YouTubers out there who gives top 12 defense rankings every single week, but I also go through and I give a bonus defense at the end of the video for you guys to pick up in preparation for next week if you have the roster space. So make sure to stay till the end, and please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and just dive right into these. This week was difficult. I will be honest with you guys right out of the gate. This was a very difficult week. We've got 4 teams on bye this week, and there's a lot of competitive matchups. So first off, in our first tier, these defenses right here are very good defenses, and they have pretty good matchups here. We've got the Browns this week taking on the Arizona Cardinals. So obviously, if you just look at the Cleveland Browns team as a whole, they're such a tremendous team. It's honestly just a shame that their record doesn't say better, because their quarterback position is such a mess. Their defense is definitely not the problem. You can see the numbers on the screen here. When you look at their sacks per game and their turnovers per game, they're really not that good. So you're wondering, like, why are they a good fantasy defense? Well, the reason they average 8.4 fantasy points per game is because they don't let you have anything. They're not letting teams score a bunch of points on them. They're not letting teams score a bunch of yardage in their favor. That's going to come again this week against the Arizona Cardinals, who are just in a tailspin right now. Arizona's offense is in an absolute tailspin, and they just made a major change at quarterback, and it's not for Kyler Murray. Clayton Tune's coming in, and this offense is going to be atrocious as usual. Cleveland's defense is the #1 defense in a very tough week. I love Cleveland's defense this week. Number 2, the New Orleans Saints this week. And they are taking on the Chicago Bears without Justin Fields. And really, that's the big thing. And even though Justin Fields is not a great real-life quarterback, Tyson Bagent is worse. And this offense's upside without Justin Fields is severely capped. And that's saying a lot. But the New Orleans Saints defense is already very good defense. They're very similar to the Browns, except they actually create and generate more turnovers per game. They get around 1.5 turnovers per game, and they just don't let you get that much. They're just a very dominant, solid defense on every single level. Their front 7 is tremendous. Their defensive line's impressive. Their linebacking core is aggressive. Their secondary, Marshawn Lattimore having another very good year. So they're just so good on every count. And Tyson Bagent, when they fall into this hole, they're not going to be able to climb out of it because the defense is going to be all over them. Saints defense is top tier this week. Number 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers here, taking on the Tennessee Titans on Thursday night. So there's really 2 reasons for this. And every week the Steelers are in here, I say the same thing. The Steelers defense is in here because they generate turnovers. They're not exactly great at stopping you from getting lots of yardage. And the reason is because it's not the defense itself is not the problem. They've got talent on the defense. The problem is they're on the field for so long, and their differential as far as time of possession throughout the season is abysmal, because the offense doesn't stay on the field. Well, Kenny Pickett's likely going to be out, and I've got news for you. Mitch Trubisky is much worse than Kenny Pickett. So Pittsburgh's defense is going to be having some issues this week. With that said, a Thursday night game at home versus the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis coming off a great game, but he didn't play the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The Atlanta Falcons defense is an easy defense to slice and dice. Pittsburgh's defense is going to be different. I think that Watt and Highsmith are going to get after Will Levis this week with that bad offensive line that Tennessee possesses. And I think that Pittsburgh's defense is going to be a very solid play this week against the rookie quarterback. They already create a lot of turnovers, and they get after the quarterback. Baltimore Ravens this week, taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this is a tougher matchup. I'm not saying that Seattle's offense is no good. But here's the thing about Baltimore. Not only are they a great fantasy defense, you can see the numbers on the screen. They're averaging almost 4 sacks per game, 9.4 fantasy points per game. The good thing about this particular matchup is that Seattle, their quarterback is not exactly a strong option. Geno Smith is not playing that well. The team is so talented, and they've got so many weapons that it works on most weeks. Against Baltimore's defense that is very keen on picking off the quarterback. I don't see good things here for Geno Smith. So they may put up yards. They may make this game more competitive. But the reality is it's in Baltimore. Lamar is 17-1 playing NFC teams in his career. And Baltimore's defense is tremendous. All around, checks on every box. I like Baltimore's defense this week. Number 5, the New York Jets here. And they are taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, that matchup is not tremendous. It's not a great matchup at all. But what the Chargers do, they do turn the ball over. And it's not a tremendous amount, but the Jets are so good at creating turnovers. They've got playmakers everywhere. It's not just Sauce Gardner. They're going to be able to get after Justin Herbert. They've got Quinnen Williams up front. They've got lots of great pass rushers. They've got the great secondary. The Jets defense has been so tremendous this year against top-tier opponents. They've had one of the hardest schedules all year, and they're still averaging 9.3 fantasy points per game, which is absolutely a sign of a tremendous defense. So really, it doesn't matter what the matchup is week to week. The Jets defense is a great option. Number 6, the Houston Texans defense, man. They are taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home in Houston. They're coming off an ugly loss to the Carolina Panthers this week. They're not happy right now. And Tampa Bay's offense is really struggling right now. They've lost 3 straight because Baker Mayfield has not been good. Houston is taking the ball away from you about 1 time per game. And they're getting after your quarterback at the rate of 2 sacks per game, which isn't fantastic. But Houston's defense overall has been a pretty solid defense this year at 7.6 fantasy points per game. With the matchup against a struggling Tampa Bay offense with Baker Mayfield and their weakening offensive line due to some injuries, I think Houston has a good bounce-back game this week. Number 7, the Minnesota Vikings are a really good defense, and they're taking on the Atlanta Falcons. It's in Atlanta. It doesn't matter. Atlanta's offense, first of all, is such a mess. It's actually an embarrassment. With all the talent they have on that offense, the fact that they're not a better offense and more efficient is an absolute shame. And it's just embarrassing to watch as a football fan. This team's talent is so tremendous. The fact that they're not putting up at least 25 to 30 points a game is ridiculous. But they're not, because they're not well run and they don't have a good quarterback. And they made a quarterback change mid-game in Week 8 versus the Tennessee Titans. Their quarterback room's a mess right now. And Minnesota's defense is actually pretty good. They're averaging 8.4 fantasy points per game, and they're forcing over a turnover per game. This is not the defense that we've seen over the past several years. They've got a good defensive coordinator with Brian Flores. He's a top-tier defensive coordinator. So Brian Flores, he's got this defense playing right now, and even though Minnesota's obviously down bad without Kirk Cousins now, Minnesota's defense is good, and they have a good matchup this week. Number 8, Tampa Bay taking on the Texans. The reality with Tampa Bay is that their defense is also very good as well. You can see it on the screen, 8.3 fantasy points per game. They average a pick a game, and they average a forced fumble per game. That's good stuff right there from a defense that is actually really strong. The offense is the problem here. That's the reality with Tampa Bay right now. And Houston, they did look bad offensively against the Carolina Panthers. They looked really sluggish, and it just wasn't a good look out of the bye for Houston. So Tampa Bay's defense to me is a good option this week. I'd still prefer Minnesota's defense. I'd still prefer Houston's defense, but Tampa Bay does have a strong defense. They get after your quarterback and they create turnovers, and I like that from a defensive fantasy football. Dallas Cowboys at number 9 here, taking on Philadelphia in Philadelphia. This one's going to take some explaining. This tier is going to take some explaining here. So why is Dallas's defense number 9? Well, first of all, they're a great defense. The numbers on the screen speak for themselves. You do not see defenses averaging 14 fantasy points per game. That is wide receiver 1 numbers in fantasy football. Running back 1 numbers in fantasy football. That's tremendous work right there from a defense in fantasy football. That's the number 1 reason. So matchup, it doesn't always matter. Here's the number 2 reason right here. I had to break this down very meticulously because I know I'm going to get lots of questions why Cowboys are top 10. When you look at Philadelphia and the turnover differential team by team, Philadelphia is a bottom 10 team in turnover differential. So what does that mean? They're giving away the ball more than they're taking it away. Their turnover differential is negative, and it's not good. And the thing about Dallas' defense, they're getting lots of interceptions this year. They've got ball hawks and they've got pass rush. that is getting after quarterback, forcing errors. Dallas is tied for third in the league with 9 interceptions forced. Well, this matches up really well against Philadelphia because Jalen Hurts, as good as he has been, and I like Jalen Hurts a lot, he's thrown 8 picks this year. This is the matchup here. It matches up well. Dallas's turnover-happy defense, Philadelphia's turnover-happy offense. It doesn't matter if Dallas wins this game. If they can create some turnovers here, they're going to be a good fantasy defense option. Not top 5, but top 10. I do like them in this spot. The Commanders' defense taking on the New England Patriots is number 10. And really, this just comes down to the Commanders' defense taking on a great opponent. Like, New England's offense is so bad that even if they win the game, which they very well could, and I actually expect New England to win this game, it doesn't matter because their offense is never going to put up points. They're either going to win ugly or they're going to get outscored and just dominated because they can't keep up. New England's offense is awful this year. They can't put points on the board. And Washington, as bad as their defense has been, they do get after your quarterback, averaging over 3 sacks a game and over a turnover per game. So Washington's defense has playmakers. And with the matchup here against New England, it's a no-brainer for me to have them inside the top 10, especially in a week like this where there's lots of tough matchups. Indianapolis Colts defense at number 11, finding themselves in the top 12 again because they're taking on the Panthers in Carolina. So, yes, Carolina did get their first win this past week against the Texans. And yes, Indianapolis defense is not nearly as good as I once thought they were. It's actually been a big disappointment. I was going from having them ranked consistently in the top 12 to just wondering where I went wrong in my analysis. Because look at the numbers on the screen. They don't speak very highly of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the good thing is they do create turnovers. They do create turnovers at a decent rate here. The problem is they give up a lot of yards. Well, Carolina doesn't get a lot of yards. So the matchup is there. Carolina did win last week, but they still weren't exactly a great offense in week 8. So I think the matchup just lines here perfect with Indianapolis' weak defense giving up yards, going up against Carolina's weak offense, putting up yards. I like my chances here with Indianapolis inside the top 12. Cincinnati Bengals defense rounding it out against the Buffalo Bills. Again, this will take some explaining right here. And I understand this one. The matchups are tough this week, so let me explain it to you. Here's the reason why Cincinnati's defense is a top 12 defense. Cincinnati, right now, they're second in interceptions forced with 10. Their ball-hawking secondary is getting the ball. They're creating turnovers at a massive rate. Josh Allen, as good as he is, and as electric as he is, and as many points as I think they will put on the board against Cincinnati, number 1, their offense is not running well right now. There's issues in Buffalo right now. And number 2, Josh Allen is tied for 5th in the league with 8 interceptions thrown. Again, very similar to the Dallas matchup where you've got a defense that gets interceptions and a quarterback that throws them at a decent rate. It matches up here. If Cincinnati wins this game, and I expect them to, what if they only win by 3 and it's 34-31? Well, obviously they're going to give up a lot of points, but if they can get Josh Allen to turn the ball over twice, it's going to be a pretty good week in fantasy football for this defense, and that's why they're inside the top 12. And as promised, my bonus defense pickup for next week for Week 10 fantasy football, if you have the roster space, it's going to be the Seattle Seahawks defense versus the Washington Commanders. So as of the time of this filming, Seattle's defense is 56% rostered at the moment. So it's not like they're widely available, right? That's at the moment, right? Because Seattle's defense, I believe, is going to get dropped this week. They're playing the Baltimore Ravens. Nobody wants to have Seattle's defense starting for them, as good as they've been. And that's the important piece. Seattle's defense has been tremendous in fantasy football. They've been absolutely physical. They're getting the ball from you. They're getting turnovers, and that leads them to being a top 6 fantasy defense in 2023. Then they're taking on Washington in Seattle, coming off that type of week. Yeah, the matchup is going to be good here for Seattle. They're taking on an offense that's really turnover happy. Sam Howell's really turnover prone. When people drop the Seahawks defense, if you've got the roster space, pick them up, stash them on your bench for Week 10. So let me know what you think of the defense rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 9 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 9 fantasy football, click on this video right here.